Hello and welcome. You're watching Think Up. In today's program, we are talking about the conference that has just happened in Warsaw, Poland. It is the Middle East Peace and Security Conference that the US has actually initiated and that was hosted by Poland. I have with me today in the studio Ali Javadi, who is member of the leadership of the WPI. Ali, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Patty.
Ali, this conference that just happened on the 13th and 14th of February in Poland, it was organized by the US and they invited about 70 nations and 60 came. It was about the Middle East, but all the different things about peace and security in the Middle East. But everybody sort of knew that it was really about Iran. Tell us, why did the US organize this conference?
The stated objective of the conference was about, as you said, peace and security in the Middle East, with the focus on the Islamic regime of Iran. But the organizer, US and Poland, basically, particularly and United States, is part of the lack of peace and security in the Middle East, and they cannot be part of the solution. Let me elaborate this issue. If someone really wants to get to the root causes of the lack of peace and security in the Middle East, obviously you have to start with the presence of the Islamic regime of Iran. Islamic regime of Iran is a reactionary regime that basically has expanded its terrorist wings within the Middle East region, and it's a regional force, is reactionary regional force at this time. At the same time, historical problems such as the Palestinian and Israeli conflict is one of the main sources of insecurity and lack of peace in the Middle East. Also, you have to add to this issue the militaristic policies of the United States, the interventionist policies of the United States that has added to these dimensions of the lack of peace and insecurity in the Middle East. So when we talk about these issues, in order to get to the root causes and the fundamental issues, you have to address all of them. Half of the truth, as they say, is a big lie. United States is also a part of the problem, not part of the solution, along with the Islamic regime, not only its regional policies, rather its presence, its establishment and regional policies, and also along with the Palestinian-Israeli issues.
So what did the US hope hope to get out by organizing this conference?
That is a real question. The objective of the United States, I think, is to forge an alliance against the Islamic regime in the Middle East with the hope that they will be able to change the hegemonic role that the Islamic reactionary regime of Iran has in the Middle East and replace it with basically a coalition led by the Saudi Arabia and also the Israelis in terms of who will be the hegemonic force in the Middle East. And that is the objective. So basically they're talking about the Arabic NATO, they're talking about removing and basically mitigating the conflicts, the historical conflicts that has existed between the Arabs and Israelis, and they are trying to solidify a solidarity among these reactionary forces against another reactionary force such as the Islamic regime of Iran. This is the real objective, and that's what they want to do. At the same time that they are talking about this containment with the maximum pressure, with the reactionary economic sanctions against the Islamic regime, their objective at the same side is also to bring the Islamic regime to the negotiation table to strike a new deal in replace of the nuclear deal that the Obama basically struck with the Islamic regime.
So what do you think has the US achieved? What has this conference achieved? What is the outcome?
I don't think they have achieved peace and security in the Middle East. That is very clear. We talked about it. What they might have been able to achieve is that they have brought together a little bit of the coalition that is now more solid in terms of its confrontations against the Islamic regime of Iran. They are now talking about coalitions of the Arab states under the leadership of the Saudi Arabia, and also a coalition that the Israeli forces and the government will support it, and they are sidestepping all of the historical Palestinian issues in this regard. In that dimension, they have achieved that. Also, it was mentioned that the conference focuses on Iran. It also has other objectives, and the other objective was that to what extent U.S. will have the leadership role in the Middle East, whether the European policies will basically prevail or the US policy will prevail. And also at the same time, it was against Russia. Remember, Poland, Warsaw was the centerpiece for the Warsaw coalition, military coalition during the Cold War. Now, Poland is basically a pro-US government, and they want to establish and basically extend the footprint of the NATO in that regard. And Poland is becoming an important ally to the US in the NATO treaty.
So at that conference, while the conference was being held, there were several opposition groups, Iranian opposition groups that were protesting in the vicinity of the conference. They seemingly are in support of this conference. The WPI wasn't there. Why is that?
Obviously, we are not going to participate. Our strategy in terms of the changing and overthrowing the reactionary Islamic regime of Iran does not rely on the US policies and the militaristic and the economic sanctions that US imposes against the Islamic regime. One has to understand that the opposition to the Islamic regime is not just limited to the revolutionary forces, to the freedom fighting forces, to the secularist forces. It is also a pro-West capitalist opposition, and also some of the religious sects such as the Mujahideens are also in the opposition. And these oppositions have nothing to do with the demands and the aspiration of the people in Iran for the betterment of the life, for the freedom, for the secularism, for the prosperity, for the equality of the women and men, for the egalitarian society. It has nothing to do with it. They want to bring the old regime back to power as far as the monarchists are concerned. And they have their own heir of the king in basically closet. They want to bring it out. They want to basically reestablish the police state that they had in Iran during the Shah in replace of the terrorist regime of the Islamic in Iran. And the Mujahideen basically are also another religious sect that they are trying to overthrow the Islamic regime and establish a sect, and they have their own president, self-appointed president in the closet also, Maryam Rajavi. These organizations have nothing to do with the aspirations, the revolutionary aspirations of the working people and the freedom-loving people in Iran. WPI obviously did not participate. Our strategy to overthrow the Islamic regime has nothing to do with the policies of the US. Rather, it is based on the social movements, revolutionary social movement in Iran, working class movements, women's movements, and also the freedom movements that the general population is demanding. We rely on those forces. As far as the US policies is concerned, we are against the militaristic approaches. We are against the economic sanction. As long as they don't support the Islamic regime of Iran, and we want to pressure them not to recognize the Islamic regime of Iran as a legitimate government in the United Nations, in the ILO, and all these international organizations, we will be happy. We do not expect any support from the US. We rely on the social movements in Iran to overthrow the Islamic regime. The future of Iran will be decided by the working class movements and the social movements in Iran, not by the regime change policies that the US basically organized and implemented it in Iraq and in other parts of the world.
Ali Javadi, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
You've watched Think Up. Until the next program, goodbye.